Hey, Bills Mafia. We know there's only one topic every day. All Bills, all the time. And now Matt Beauvais and Sal Capaccio are going really deep, talking Bills all year long, because it's always game day in Buffalo.
Well, the big shoe has dropped. A lot of shoes have dropped, but the one that we knew was going to happen at some point that would be really most impactful for Buffalo Bills as far as money is concerned and as far as reward is Josh Allen. Welcome into It's Always Game Day in Buffalo. He's Matt Beauvais. I'm Sal Capaccio. Thanks for joining us. If you're watching us, if you're listening to us, it doesn't matter. Huge news for the Buffalo Bills, Matt. The Bills have locked up their MVP quarterback, Josh Allen, for 2 more years from his original deal was. We'll get to that in a second. But the big news is highest paid player in NFL history, essentially.
Yeah, most guaranteed money in NFL history, $250 million, $330 million over the course of the contract, an extension that keeps him in Buffalo through the 2030 season. Josh Allen right now is, 28 years old? This is going to take him into his mid-30s. Just another step towards Josh Allen playing his entire career in Buffalo. Is it an astronomical amount of money? Absolutely. This is ridiculous money, but it is somehow less than I thought he was going to get. As ridiculous as that sounds, he's not the highest paid quarterback in the NFL. That's still Dak Prescott. He is the most guaranteed money guy, right? Like that's the way that the Bills are giving him his flowers and his respects for, the seasons that he has had. But when you look at the year per year salary, where Trevor Lawrence is. So you certainly would take that. It still seems like even though he got a massive deal, he was also trying to do the Bills a bit of a favor.
All right, yeah, you're right. And I just said a little while ago, highest paid player in history. That's because guaranteed money is when it counts. That's right. The overall numbers, it's not that, but he's amongst it. So you're right. It averages out to be $55 million a year.
Yep.
It's $330 million over 6 years. This is being reported by Adam Schefter. This is the number on it. All right, so let's just break this down for a second. Josh Allen had still 4 years remaining on his contract. That on those 4 years, this particular year, 2025, he had $44 million of a cap hit. He had a $44 million cap hit.
Mm-hmm.
What the Bills did here was they didn't extend him for 6 years like they did Rousseau and Bernard, where they extend him and you still play on the last year of your deal and then you extend out. They essentially, it sounds to me, Matt, gave him a new 6-year contract. They ripped up the old one.
Yep.
They gave him a new one. Or if you want to look at it this way, folks, he got a 2-year extension on top of the 4 years he was already under contract.
For an additional $200 million, a 2-year extension for $200 million.
Right. The question is going to be now, how creative did Brandon Beane get and how with the salary cap? Because I'm expecting here that the salary cap is not going to be $44 million. As astronomical as this money is, to me, you're lowering his salary cap in 2025. I'd be stunned if it doesn't not only lower it by pretty significant amount, actually.
I think that this move, the way they've had to know this one is coming.
Yeah.
Quarterback contracts are incredibly complicated. It takes several people to put these things together. We have gotten to know the people. Putting together any NFL contract is complicated. Putting together this one is like a thesis in neuropsychology or something. Whatever the most complicated thing in the world is, putting together this contract is probably not far behind. But I agree with you. The first thing I thought when I saw the news right before we started recording this was, I wonder how much cap space this opened. Then I immediately jumped to DK Metcalf. Now, we'll have an update on DK Metcalf shortly because he is not coming to Buffalo. But I do think that right now, we're recording this on Sunday night, like they probably have $25 million of spending money in that range. Yeah. And that's before they have restructured or we know other guys that I'm sure they've done stuff with already.
So last time we talked to everybody was right after they extended to Terrell Bernard. Excuse me. Am I right? That because there's been so much going on.
We talked
I think the last time we did this, right?
Yeah, we talked on Friday afternoon after they extended Terrell Bernard.
And they'd already done Shakir, and they just did Bernard. So right after that, they extend Greg Rousseau. So that happened over the weekend. So I'm piggybacking on your point. Greg Rousseau was scheduled to make over $13 million of a salary cap hit. We talked about this. According to Spot Track and Over the Cap, 2 really good websites we both use to kind of keep track of all this stuff. They both had the Bills still about, little difference in the sites, but about $1 million over the cap, counting Rousseau's $13 million cap hit. My sense is that cap hit is also going to be lowered by probably about $9-10 million for Greg Rousseau. It's a pretty big chunk. You asked me how much I'd give him, how much I'd be comfortable. I said it, 4 years for 80. All right. So we got it.
Called your shot.
Called my shot. 4 years for 80, 20 million a year. But that money also, to me, is going to lower his cap. So let's just go by what Spot Track and Over the Cap have, which was $1 million over before Rousseau's numbers come in.
Mm-hmm.
Let's lower that by 10. They should have about $9 million there. Mm-hmm. And then whatever Josh has done on top of that. So let's just say $9 to $10 million before the Josh restructure or contract extension here. And then whatever Josh's cap lowers by, you'll add that onto it.
Yeah, for sure. And we also, not to the level that we can report it, but there are other players who have restructured deals that will be announced probably in the next couple of days. Some of them might not even get announced. And that's why I think conservatively, they're probably at $25 million. And I wouldn't be surprised if that number, because the other obvious ones that I think that they can do, if they do something with Deion Dawkins, if they do something with Connor McGovern, potentially he could be a sneaky extension candidate. Maybe they restructure Ed Oliver. There's other things they could do, but even now they've got spending money. I think they could almost double this number. And then as we get into the new league year, which is Wednesday at 4:00, I won't be shocked if they have somewhere around $40 to $50 million of money, which is incredible when you consider that they were $10 million over. I understand it's never just shedding money. They are pushing this down the line. But with Josh Allen, we knew it was coming, and it's deserved. You had to do this. It's not a surprise. Get him for 2 more years. This is the best problem to have. Having a guy who just won the MVP, this is what you hope happens when you have a quarterback.
Yeah, so obviously Josh gets the most guaranteed money ever, and obviously that's big news. But it feels this way, the way they structured this contract, to go more along the lines of, okay, the average annual salary, that's where you're going to basically say that's how you can tell that the salary cap is going to be able to be spread out a little bit more. I'm not saying Josh took a hometown discount, because this is still incredible money, but I do think
we did though. I do.
Okay, that's fine. You could say it. My point was going to be, clearly it seems to me that he wanted to make it work to be able to allow the team some flexibility.
Yeah, I agree.
It didn't have to be, I'm going to take less money, but that's fine. He took less than, what his market value would have been. But I think that Josh and Brandon Beane and Josh's agent and Brandon Beane and everybody with the Bills, Kevin Meegang, Jim Overdorf, the people who do these contracts, I'm guessing they all worked and said, look, how can we do this to make sure he gets rewarded, but also we have flexibility going forward, which they obviously do. So Josh Allen locked up for the Bills. He was locked up for another 4 years. Now this will take him through 2030. So he's under contract with the Buffalo Bills for 6 more years. And it is a record-setting guarantee, total 250 guaranteed, 250 million. And the total number, according to Adam Schefter and others, 6 years, $330 million. Crazy.
Yeah, it's an insane amount of money. And it is, I don't even know how to put it into words. The thing that I said on Twitter was that I think that it is a little bit of a hometown discount. It's a little less than I was anticipating. I thought it was going to be closer to the $60-65 million a year range. He is one of the most impactful athletes in the history of Western New York sports. And when I posted that, a couple people were like, one of? Right now, one of. Just because, he's got more to prove in his career. He wins 1 Super Bowl. He's the most important athlete in the history of Buffalo sports. And I don't even think there's an argument of anybody else who's even close. Up until that, he's one of the most important athletes in the history of Western New York sports. And, you always wonder with these guys, is something going to happen? Is the relationship going to get severed? Things can still happen, of course. Adding 2 more years onto this contract extension that he already had, though, puts him into his mid-30s. The way he plays football, I don't know if this is going to be somebody who plays till he's 43, like Tom Brady. Like, that might be it. Or maybe there's one more extension even down the road.
Okay, so last time we talked, we said we ended up with the Terrell Bernard. Then we got Greg Rousseau. It's been interesting seeing some of the responses come in about Rousseau, because as we said here, it came in right around what we thought it would be, which was exactly at 4 years, $80 million. That's the high end. It's $50 million guaranteed. That's what really counts here. But the response from some fans is, boy, that's too much money. He's not even had double-digit sacks. Response from other fans is, oh my gosh, he's a really good player. And actually, he'd get a lot more if he's on the open market. This is a good job by the Bills. Where do you fall?
I fall, it's a lot of money, but once again, lower than I thought he would get. $20 million a year. To your credit, you called your shot. One of those things of like, hey, wouldn't be surprised if this happened. 4 years, $80 million. And then the next day it gets announced that it happens. So kudos to you. It's lower than I thought it was going to be. I have said on the podcast, I was not all aboard giving Greg Rousseau some massive contract extension, but as ridiculous as it is in the NFL, 4 years for $80 million is not like some ridiculously crazy massive contract extension. If you look at it from, this is my PSA to anybody who is listening to this podcast or watching this podcast. Whenever somebody signs a contract, my group messages go off of all of my friends who are massive Bills fans, and they go, oh, Greg Rousseau is the 12th highest paid passer in the NFL. I want everybody to look at the percentage of the salary cap the player signs for when the deal is signed, because with the rising cap, that is such an important detail. Because, listen, him signing for $20 million a year now is very different than somebody signing for $20 million a year 3 years ago, as we see the cap continuing to rise. Also, him doing this a couple days before free agency starts, right now I'm putting air quotes up, the 12th highest paid pass rusher in the NFL. In a week, he's going to be the 17th or 18th highest paid pass rusher in the NFL. So that's just the way that the business side of it works. I think that it's a fair deal. I think that it's about what he's worth, and it's less than he would have gotten on the open market.
Yeah, I agree with all that. I think that, and I want to respect and understand where people are coming from, especially because we know that the defensive line, which Greg has been a part of, has come up not very big in the biggest of moments, in the biggest of games. And I totally respect that. I understand that. Greg Rousseau's a young player. He's a really good player. A lot of times, though, my response to those people would be, well, who are you replacing him with? Are you going out and signing a guy for a lot more money who, you don't know? I mean, if you can get Myles Garrett, that's not happening. We know, by the way, that happened. Myles Garrett is, going back to Cleveland. We know that. Are you drafting somebody? Yeah, it'd be nice to have a rookie come in and be rookie of the year and have all these sacks. You can't bank on that. So, I just, what's the answer if you don't have a really good player who you're locking up at good money that's yours and you developed and he's here and you love him. He loves to be here. And I don't know. I can respect an opinion that people think he might've got a little overpaid, but you're going to have guys. You got to have players and, where you're getting them from. So, and how much you're going to pay them, could wind up being even more if you let a guy like Greg Rousseau walk because you're trying to replace him. So I think from that aspect is how I look at it.
Let me ask you this, because Josh Sweat is going to be a guy that gets paid a ton of money when free agency starts. Who is a better player, Greg Rousseau or Josh Sweat?
Better overall player. I think Greg Rousseau. I think I'd say Greg he's an edge setter. I know Josh Sweat had a really good year and had a great Super Bowl. It took him a little while to come on. I think Greg's had a solid career. I mean, I guess being close to it, I'd say Greg Rousseau, but I think for all the things he does, not just being a pass rusher, I'd say Greg Rousseau.
Well, the other reason that I asked you that is because there's important differentiation right here, is that Greg Rousseau is 24, Josh Sweat is 27. They both turn 20. They both have a birthday within the next month. So you're talking about a player who's 25 when the next season starts and a player who's 28 when the next season starts. So for the Bills, you are getting this player entering the prime of his career at that number. And then, I mean, even look what Harold Landry got when he signed with the Patriots earlier today.
Yes.
Like, that's substantial money for a player, a good player, but like for comparable money, I think Greg Rousseau is the better contract.
It is pretty amazing. Greg Rousseau's only 24. He'll be 25 the day after my birthday. We'll flip it. I'll be 52. He'll be 25. We'll reverse the numbers one day after another. Okay. But Greg Rousseau is amazing. He was born in 2000. Then the Bills also brought back their long snapper, Reid Ferguson. He's a different situation. He wasn't going into the last year of his deal. He was a guy who was going to be a free agent. I don't think this surprises anyone, but we at least want to give a Reid Ferguson a little bit of love here on the podcast. It's always game day in Buffalo. One of the good guys we love talking to. He's always great with the media, and the longest tenured Buffalo Bill, the only player on the team, Matt, who spans this era and going back to Rex Ryan when he was coach.
Yeah, I apologize if I'm looking down. If you're watching the video side of things and I'm not looking at Sal, it's not because I'm like offended by anything that Sal is saying. I'm just texting everybody back at work at Channel 7 to try and figure out all of the Josh Allen stuff. Yeah, congratulations to Reid Ferguson. Dan Fates from Buffalo Plus, I think, actually had the contract terms out. I'm going to look at that right now. It's probably all the way down his timeline because of the Josh Allen stuff. I think he got the most money ever for a long snapper. Now, once again, when you talk about what Josh Allen gets paid, it's a little bit different. So it's a 4-year, $6.5 million contract, according to Dan, for Reid Ferguson. Josh got 6 years for $330 million. Amazing. And they are in the same locker room, and their lockers aren't even that far away from each other. Right. So you're like, hey, What $6.5 million for 4 years is still a ridiculous amount of money. Any of us would take making that much money. But the guy who's sitting across from you makes, I don't know, 15 times what you make or whatever. No, probably more than that. Like 40 times what he makes. So, yeah, good for him. I mean, longest tenured Bill, and he's going to be the longest tenured Bill because he's not going anywhere, and he's going to be another lifer.
Yeah, good family too. Kevin and Tracy got to know his parents a lot. They come up here for every game. They go see Blake play. They watch Reid play. Obviously, it's a house divided in some respects, but it's obviously one family. You know, and they wear the double jerseys, the split jerseys sometimes. Watching Blake Ferguson. By the way, in case you didn't know, Blake Ferguson, the long snapper for the Miami Dolphins, and Reid Ferguson, obviously for the Buffalo Bills. Okay, and then the Bills also made news on Sunday, releasing Von Miller. This is an interesting one. We've talked about it. Both of us totally expected something to be done with Von, whether that was a release now, a release designated at post June 1, or just a restructure. We know is an immediate release. So here's the big question I've been getting all day. Sal, why would they do this like this and not make it a post June 1 release? It's a great question. I'll answer, but there is definitely debate on how they could have done it and what is more beneficial for the team. By doing it now, everybody, yes, the Bills are going to eat $15 million in salary cap, dead salary cap. They have to have $15 million counting on the cap for Von Miller, who's not on the roster. They also immediately open up $8.3 million for this year to use starting Monday, Wednesday, free agency. Okay. After that, it's all gone. Nothing next year. If they designated a post-June 1 cut, they would have saved actually on the salary cap. They would have saved $17 million on the salary cap. 17, which is like, wow, why didn't they would not have that money available to them until June 1st. They couldn't use it. It would be tied up. And they would count less money as a dead cap, but in 2 years.
Yes.
Close to $7 million this year and close to $7 million next year. So it's chicken and egg. It's a good argument. This is why they did it now.
Yeah, for sure. I understand the reasoning behind it because they probably want to have this money available now as opposed to having it to use later down the road. They also probably knew that they were about to give Josh Allen this massive contract, so they wanted that little bit of extra flexibility down the road and not having as much money go into the future, knowing how much they're going to be paying Josh Allen. All of these millions matter when you're talking about these types of things. I'm really interested to see how this plays out, just because I know that it's usually a throwaway line, but when the insiders reported that Von was getting cut, every one of them included both sides are open to a potential reunion. So I wonder if this was the Bills' way of getting his money off the books, knowing what they had to spend, and then in a month or two having him come back for $3 million a year. Unless there's like a contender that really, really wants him, I could see that playing out.
So if that were to happen, so everybody knows, the 15 mil that dead cap would still count. No matter what that's counting. No matter what happens from here on out, the Bills have to take out a 15 million dead cap for Von Miller. If he were to re-sign, it would be 15 million plus whatever he resigns for. If, as you say, Matt, 3 million. So it'd be counting 18 million instead of what it was going to be 23. So that's where you got to wash it. Okay, he was going to count 23. We're moving on from him. So if obviously you're not going to do that, or else they would have just kept him on the roster. But it's 15. And then if he were to come back, 15 plus whatever else he signs for. Okay, so that's Von Miller. He's been released. We are looking at other things that could happen. Let me give you this list here for a second, okay? I tweeted this out yesterday. Because of these moves set the Bills up very well over the next several years. Now, not counting guys who signed reserve futures deals, Matt, not counting guys essentially on the practice squad last year, or a whole bunch of guys who are going to be signing one-year deals. This is all the Bills have for guys going into the last year of their deal. Mitch Trubisky, Mike White, James Cook, that's a big one, Connor McGovern, as you mentioned, David Edwards, A.J. Epinesa, Daquan Jones, Bale Inspector, Christian Benford, Kyrie Elam, and Cam Lewis. That is it. Of all the players who were on the team as active roster players last year, that is the list of guys who are going into the final year of their deal. That is great work for the Bills to basically say, hey, we don't really have to deal with a lot of this next year. There's some things, maybe Benford, maybe Cook, maybe you deal with them still now, though.
Yeah, definitely. I think to the Bills' credit, they had a plan that they started to execute last year that kind of put them in this position this year. Now, like we said, you never completely get out of things. You're going to have to pay these guys, and it's going to get more complicated as time goes on. But I think we both agree that the correct strategy here is to attack the window that you're currently in, kind of like the Eagles have done, like the Saints did forever. They just didn't do it with a good team. when you have this franchise quarterback in his prime, you need to make the most of these years. And if that means you put all of your chips in to try and win a Super Bowl from now until 2027, if you win one, who cares how big of a cap mess you have once that is done? Like, that's the price that you have to pay. So they've got some things they've got to figure out. They've got some other players that they got to figure out. Of the names that you've mentioned, the McGovern extension to me would not be shocking, just because, it's not like he's a player that makes a ton of money. I believe he has 2 years left. Is 2 years or 1 year left on his deal? 1 year left on his deal.
I believe 1 year left.
I think
yes.
1 year left on his deal.
Yes.
When they signed him to be a guard. Now he's a center. There's probably a difference in money there that they want to make sure they have right. David Edwards is another interesting name, just because he's very, very affordable. I don't really think anything they could do now would lower his number, because it already is so low.
Right.
And then Christian Benford is the one that I'm a bit surprised hasn't happened yet. But with cornerbacks, the market is probably a bit more complicated to figure out than some of these other positions they have already figured out.
So with Connor McGovern, he has a base salary this year of $5.35 million. They could lower that number, and they could give him an extension, lower that number a little bit, spread some money out. So they could, he has a cap number of $9.3 million because of the void years. So that's something you could do there. What other players are we looking at? I've said, and I don't know if the team would want to, because they really like him. If you're looking at any June 1st cuts, I do think that AJ Epinesa has a big number that you could save some money. I think it's $7 million if you release him as a post-June 1 cut. But I don't know if the team is interested in that. They might really just want to have AJ Epinesa because he's been a nice rotational piece for them. You can only do, I believe, Matt, 2 June 1st cuts every year, by the way. I think you can only do a maximum of 2 June 1 cuts.
Yeah, I actually didn't know that. I
believe that's the rule for every team. A lot of people asked about Matt Milano. Look, I'll say this. I'm pretty confident in telling you Matt Milano will be back in 2025. I don't think they're moving on from Matt Milano. I wouldn't be surprised if something's done with his contract, though. He's another guy accounting for a big cap hit. That's the kind of guy you can go to. Maybe you can adjust something there. I'm confident in saying I think he's back in 2025, but we'll see if anything's done there. There's some other guys around the board, though, that obviously maybe you don't even think about. And we could be hearing between now and, noon on Monday or Wednesday, I should say, that the Bills are moving off of. And that also could be predicated upon them striking a deal with somebody during the legal tampering period and saying, we got to have money for this guy. So where are we going to find it?
Yeah, definitely. I've got a couple interesting ideas that I want to throw out to you, because now we know. Is there anything else Bills specific we want? Obviously, the entire podcast is Bills specific.
Right.
But I think so much of today's news is predicated on other players going elsewhere or deciding to stay put, and how that impacts the Bills.
Go ahead.
Okay, well, obviously the big one is Myles Garrett, right?
Yep.
Myles Garrett gets $40 million a year, stays in Cleveland. When you found that out, when you heard the news, what was your immediate reaction?
I was actually surprised. I know people could say they were not surprised because this is what happens and the player wants more money. It really seemed like he was dug in, and this was going very south very quickly. So I was surprised.
Yeah, I was surprised as well. I did think that he was going to get moved, but then when you see how much money he got paid, I don't know how the Bills could afford the Josh Allen extension and the Myles Garrett money that they dished out today. And then right after Josh Allen, so right before we start, like literally a minute before we started recording this podcast, DK Metcalf gets traded from the Seahawks to the Pittsburgh Steelers. So DK Metcalf, you want to talk about nonsense getting out there. They wanted a first-round pick for him, a first and a third. He gets traded for a second. He wanted to go to a warm weather city. He goes to Pittsburgh. He wanted to go to a contender. No, shots at Pittsburgh here. Not a contender. And wanted to play with a great quarterback. Okay. Doesn't really seem like you checked any of those boxes there, DK. But he gets a 5-year, $150 million contract extension. So $30 million a year for a wide receiver. It's a big, big, big payday. And, now the Bills have to try and find somebody else to be the big offensive weapon that they had this offseason.
No doubt. The other, a couple other names we've heard about here now recently, Sam Darnold, how about Geno Smith? Geno Smith getting traded. That happened, I think, after we had recorded. That happened on Friday. Geno Smith goes and reunites with the Las Vegas Raiders. Nice move for the Raiders to get a guy that has been pretty good. They're kind of in quarterback quandary here. They don't really have anybody. They need a bridge of some sort. So they've been kind of wandering the wilderness. Geno Smith's better than pretty much what they've had. Is Sam Darnold going to the Steelers? Is that what's going to happen now with DK Metcalf there?
No, I think it's going to be Russ, right? I think they're going to keep Russ for another year.
Really? I don't
Yeah.
know. I thought I see. This is interesting. Full disclosure, like I haven't been reading. If you unless you read something recently, I read earlier today. Justin Fields more than Russ back
Well,
there.
yeah, I did see that, but my so two things. I was just looking at a tweet that said that Sierra and Russell Wilson actually introduced DK Metcalf and his girlfriend or fiance to each other, so there's some sort of relationship there. And then wouldn't Russ and DK have played together in Seattle?
Say it again. Wouldn't Russ
W-
and
wouldn't Russ
DK?
and DK overlap
Oh,
in Seattle?
sure. Yeah,
I
sure.
would
Yep.
think. So I'm sure that there's some familiarity there. And it's funny because like DK Metcalf and George Pickens do two things really well, and it's take deep shots down the field, the long ball,
Right.
and that's like the one ball Russell Wilson can still throw.
Yeah. I'm trying
I
to
mean,
think of it.
Darnold makes sense, I guess, but I don't know. I feel like he's more likely to go to the Seahawks.
Could very well. We'll see where that winds up. Oh, the other one. Yeah, Devontae Adams going to the Rams. Did you just talk about him or no? I don't know if you mentioned him.
No,
Devontae
I did
Adams going
not.
to the
I
Rams.
did not talk about
How about
Devontae.
that
That
one?
was
Devontae Adams. He's, all this stuff about him, wanting to rejoin with Aaron Rodgers and all that. I made a joke on Twitter that, does he know Rodgers only played college ball in California? He's not there anymore. He's not going to the Rams. Aaron Rodgers. Not to my knowledge. I don't think he is. They just re-upped with Stafford. But Devontae Adams, another one. He's going to the LA Rams. So this is the time. You brought up Harold Landry. Harold Landry was not very good last year. He still put up some productive numbers, but that's all he could really do with 9 sacks. But I would say this, he's going to the Patriots where Mike Vrabel's head coach, and Mike Vrabel did a great job with him in Tennessee a few years ago, knew how to use him. They're paying him, I think, 3 years, $43 million, something like that. So obviously in the division, that's very notable. I did see a tweet from Connor Hughes, who covers the Jets.
Yeah.
He said a couple names to watch out for the Jets. Tillery, the defensive lineman, and he said, but especially Javon Holland for the Jets.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting. That's a fun one. I mean,
Yeah.
he's a good player, and I think that makes sense. I feel like that's a phone call the Bills could make, though. I feel like that's a phone call the Bills could make. Here's a fun one. This is a little bit out there, but let's get weird on this Sunday evening. If they really are selling.
I'm sorry. I have to. Deadspin just tweeted out a video of Josh Allen, and the tweet reads, I'm going to read it to everybody. This is great.
Yeah.
Oh, look at me. I'm Josh Allen. I have a rocket arm. I run over the best athletes in the world. I make insane plays every week. I just got paid $330 million. I'm marrying Haley Steinfeld. I'm the king of my city.
Well, do you know the backstory to that tweet?
No.
Okay, so there's a backstory to that exact template. There's a backstory to that template, and it's from, I believe, a Dolphins fan, and it's basically all of those things, and it's like, oh, look at me, I'm Josh Allen, I have a rocket arm, I'm the king of my city, but the tweet ends with,
right.
F you is how the tweet ends. Like basically like, oh yeah, so I can't believe that I have to deal with this every single year, twice a year in the division.
I love that.
So yeah, that's been like a running bit with Josh Allen. So good on Deadspin for posting that, bringing it back. All right, you made my dramatic pause even more interesting.
Okay.
I have a fun possibility. I don't think the Bills will do it, but it's a fun one.
Okay.
Brandon Ayuk. Think they would move him?
Yeah, I think they would move him. I think the Niners are a type of team that's doing a lot of interesting stuff now, and they need to kind of reset a little bit.
So do I. I mean, I think that they got a lot of stuff they got to figure out. He is 26. He's about to turn 27 next week. So fits the window of target that they would be interested in. I also wonder, he's such an anti-Bills guy, but how the heck do George Pickens and DK Metcalf coexist?
Oh, that's going to be interesting. I had Nico Tamurian. You know Nico, actually Buffalo State grad like you. He covers the Seahawks. And Nico said, listen, he is not like, I know he's got this reputation around maybe of being
this isn't about him.
Whatever.
This is about George Pickens.
Okay, good. Because I just want everybody to know, like, he said, listen, he's actually more like, I would compare him to Alec Anderson. Like, he's just always involved trying to help his teammates, and he gets into scraps, and that's what it is. But he's not a malcontent on the sidelines or anything like that with his teammates. He's a great teammate. But listen, from being at the combine, I will tell you this, Matt, like Steelers reporters even just telling me how just it is not great dealing with George Pickens and how the Steelers this is just a guy that makes life miserable for a lot of people there.
Yeah, much more of a headache than I think most teams would be willing to take off. Take on a super talented player. But, obviously that's an interesting thing to watch. I really think the Bills they're not clearing up cap space for no reason. They have to have a couple things up their sleeve. They have to.
Well, they have to sign players, first of all. That has to happen, and they have to get under the cap. They got to get to 90. They're at 53, 54 right now. I have to look at my chart that I put 55 active players. Oh, just some cleaning, some stuff to clean up for everybody so they understand. You can't fit 90 people under the salary cap, folks.
It's
right?
top 51 at this point, right?
Starting Wednesday it is.
Starting Wednesday.
So starting Wednesday at 4 p.m., the top 51 salary caps on your team count towards the cap. Everybody under the line 51 doesn't even count. Otherwise, you'd never be able to get to 90, and everybody has to get to 90.
Yeah, which is why I know they need to sign players, but they're going to sign, of the 37 players that they need to sign, 27 of those will be 1 year, $1.2 million contracts that don't count on their salary cap. And you think back to last year, they're the guys like Chase Claypool. They're the guys of like MVS of, oh yeah, maybe it works out. Maybe it doesn't. We'll see what happens. We'll go to training camp. And then if they make the roster, fantastic. That's going to be most of the moves that the Bills make, but they're clearing up cap space to do something. It's not Myles Garrett. It's not Max Crosby. It's not DK Metcalf. It's not these guys. But I still feel like they have to have something up their sleeve. There's some interesting names out there. It feels like we have now shifted to this is probably going to be a much more normal offseason than maybe we were anticipating. Like they're probably going to use their first-round pick. They're probably going to use both of their second-round picks. Probably going to go sign a couple nice free agents. I don't know if we're going to get the massive splash, but I wonder if they're going to go after a couple mid-tier players, because last year that's not what they did. Last year the biggest addition that they made in free agency was Curtis Samuel, right? I'm not forgetting anybody. Last year the news was moving on from people. I think we'll see a couple moves that are moving the meter a little bit more than anything they did last year.
So Jason from Over the Cap, really nice tweet by him. He said, Bills by far should be getting the award for most proactive team of the year. And they're being proactive by signing their own guys. And I think I agree with you, Matt. They'll be more proactive by signing other guys as well, or maybe trading for guys. We'll see where that goes. Where do you think this James Cook stuff goes from here now? What kind of impact does it have? Is that possible? Is that a possibility? Maybe they're clearing space to make sure they can make James Cook happy.
I don't think so. I don't think they're clearing space to make James Cook happy. I think that you got to give at somewhere. I don't think that they realized that they were close, but I don't think their idea of trying to get close again is just running it back with the exact same people that they've had. James Cook is going to be back regardless. If I were the Bills, I would see where things stand later on in the summer. If you got more money, then you do right by him and you give him a contract extension. If you can't figure it out, then you go into this year with James Cook on a really affordable deal. Next year, you franchise tag him. He's pissed. He probably doesn't show up in the offseason until training camp, probably misses a couple practices, then eventually shows up. That's just kind of my worst case scenario with James Cook. If he's willing to give a little bit and maybe sign it like $12 or $13 million a year. I saw the Aaron Jones one today. I thought that was interesting. 2 years, $20 million. He's a better player at this point in his career than Aaron Jones. So he should $10 million is the absolute floor. It's going to be higher than that, but I don't think it's going to get to $15 million like he's been posting on social media. I just really don't.
All right. So here's how it works, everybody. On Monday, we're recording Sunday night here. We're thanking you very much for watching us on the Sal Sports YouTube channel. If you show up and see this on Sunday night, maybe you're catching us on Monday morning, listening to us, however you do that. Thank you very much. Download, subscribe to the Sal Sports YouTube page. Download, listen to us, Apple, iTunes, Spotify, Odyssey app, wherever it is. By Monday, maybe by the time you even hear this, Monday at noon is when teams can call agents of players who are an expiring contract. So guys who their contracts are up this year, like a Mac Hollins, like a Rousseau Douglas for the Buffalo Bills. Other teams can call the agents of those players, start negotiating a contract. They cannot talk to the player himself. They can't bring the player to the facility, nothing like that. They can agree to a deal. That deal can't be executed until Wednesday at 4 p.m. At that time, Wednesday at 4 p.m., every team must be below the 2025 salary cap for their top 51 salary cap hits. Then they can talk to the player. They can bring him in for a physical. They can sign the player, bring him to the facility, do all the pomp and circumstance. And by the way, Matt, great week to be bringing to Buffalo. We're going to have some warm, springish weather at the end of this week to be bringing guys to Buffalo if they want.
You know what I was thinking about? Remember when Mario Williams came
I
to
remember.
Buffalo?
I remember.
It was like 65 and sunny. He probably was like, look at this oasis, Buffalo. I can't leave. Then he went to Tempo. Tempo doesn't even exist anymore. It's not even a restaurant anymore. And it was like, okay, don't let him leave. Don't let him leave. Don't let him leave. I don't think we're going to be doing that. I got a couple names, though, that I feel like let's. I know I posted. I apologize. I posted on X. We would answer some questions with that super adorable video of my daughter, by the way, saying her name, Sal Capaccio. But a lot of things happened between when I tweeted that tweet and then when the show started. Give me like 2 names that you really think make sense for the Bills in free agency this week.
2 names who make sense for the Bills.
Yeah, so offense and defense.
Josh Palmer on offense.
Damn it, Sal. Sorry, I don't know if I'm allowed to swear on this podcast.
I think I said his name here on the podcast before as well.
You did. I was going to say it because the more I've looked into it, the more I like the idea.
He is like a separator, basically, right? Like,
yes. Yes, that's exactly what they need.
Yeah. So I would say Josh Palmer. On defense, not really sure. You give me one on offense or one on defense. I'm going to look at a couple names here and I'll give you one.
How about Zadarius Smith on defense?
Ooh.
I feel like I don't think the number is going to be as high as maybe some people anticipate. It feels like that is a player who probably wants to be on a good team. I think that he fits the profile and type of player the Bills like. This would be their because we've talked about Khalil Mack. We've talked about Joey Bosa. Apparently, Joey Bosa, there's a lot of interest from the Dolphins. Apparently, some of these other guys, I'm sure there's going to be interest out there. I feel like Zadarius Smith, if you are planning on adding a pass rusher in the first or second round, is a nice way of like rounding out the room a little bit and addressing it without, putting all your chips in like you would with a Myles Garrett trade or something like that.
All right. I'll give one, but I'm going to give a shout out to the guys at Cover One. We know them well. Eric and the gang over there. Because Eric has this guy as his number 1 guy for the Bills, and I agree with him. I like him. And after listening to and watching, I'm going to say DJ Jones, defensive tackle for the Denver Broncos, 300-pound space eater who can really be very, very stout at the point of attack is what they need. So I'll say DJ Jones is the guy that would really fit in Buffalo.
Okay, so I will actually break my own rule a little bit. I'm going to say another person on defense just because I feel like it's going to be a much heavier emphasis to address the defense this year.
Yep.
I'm going to say Javon Holland. I think I really...
Okay, I have to ask you a question, Ro. If you do that, is he just... Are you not... Is Cole Bishop just not a starter next year, or is Taylor Rapp not a starter?
I don't know if Taylor Rapp has to be a starter.
Boy, I think that's wild to me. I totally disagree. I think
really
Taylor Rapp, for what he did this year, the way he played, he was very integral, very steady. And Matt, he's only counting 3-something on the cap and 4-something next year, which to your point might actually help your point, not hurt it. But man, I would be stunned.
I mean, a year. I think Taylor Rapp is a nice player. I really do. I think that he does a lot of things for them well. I think in a perfect world, you use Taylor Rapp in the role that you used Cam Lewis last year, and he would be better at that role. And you have another starting safety because his money that Taylor Rapp makes more suits that role of what we're talking about with a player like Cam Lewis. No disrespect to Cam Lewis, like the player. Those guys still get on the field a ton. They had no issue with Taylor Rapp as a backup behind Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer, who at that stage in their career were not Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer. If you think Javon Holland is a clear upgrade and is a very important piece to solidifying your secondary for years to come, I would have no issue with it. And then I shouldn't even say that Taylor Rapp immediately becomes a backup. Whoever's the better safety, whatever one makes more sense, and you just see where it goes. I mean, I know a second-round pick should play in their second year a lot of snaps. Kaiir Elam hasn't played at all, and he was barely at all. And he was a first round pick.
They feel different about Cole Bishop than they did about Kaiir Elam at this point.
Definitely, but I'm just saying I don't think they're forcing a player out onto the field because of where they were drafted.
Listen, if they were to make a move at a safety, I think it's more for that spot than Taylor Rapp's. Taylor Rapp, to me, the one thing I've learned about safety, and I said this all year last year, all summer I was telling people, look, Damar Hamlin might win this starting job. People told me I was crazy, and it wasn't because I thought he was great. It's because I know what the Bills like. They like guys who know the system. They like guys they can trust.
He's definitely gone, right?
I think so. I've always thought Pittsburgh would be a good spot for him. Him and Mike Tomlin have known each other for a very long time, but I can't see Damar Hamlin coming back.
Yeah, I agree. I think so. And then I would imagine too, like there's interesting guys. I've always operated under the belief that Matt Collins and Ty Johnson will be back, but they could have both very well priced themselves out of Buffalo because of the productivity that they had last year. I think of the two, Matt Collins is more likely to come back than Ty Johnson is. A lot of, though, what they do with Ty Johnson, I think, will tell me how to feel about James Cook and a potential contract. You know, if they give Ty Johnson a 2-year, $8 million deal or something like that, I'm going to be like, yeah, they're probably not paying James Cook as well. And they're still going to have Ty Johnson be their third down back. So those are the guys that I feel really confident about coming back. And then after that, there's a bunch of guys that I feel like you just put them in kind of a bucket, and I won't be surprised if they walk or surprised if they come back. Like DeJuan Smoot is one of those guys. Austin Johnson.
Yeah.
Like all those guys I feel like can be depth players for the Bills, but not somebody that they need to have back.
All right, Matt, before we leave here, I have to ask you a couple questions.
I've got
Number
answers.
one, do you remember where you were 16 years ago this weekend when the Buffalo Bills signed Terrell Owens to a free agent contract?
Yeah, I know what you were doing. You were breaking the you were breaking the news.
I was.
Okay, not to age myself here. I was in high school. I was going to a playoff hockey game for Niagara Wheatfields.
You're not aging yourself, you're aging me.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yeah, sort of unintentionally, but also kind of intentionally, so it works out. I was going to a high school hockey game at the time Pepsi Center, now Northtown Center, and I just could not. I remember being locked in. My dad was dropping me off. I couldn't drive yet, so my dad was driving me and a friend, and listening to GR and listening to it play out on the radio, and how crazy, because it came so out of left field.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I'll tell you the story for me. It was actually the night before my anniversary. He signed on, I think, the 7th. My anniversary is the 8th with my wife, Yana.
Happy anniversary.
Thank you. We just had our anniversary yesterday. And we were going out that night, and we did go out. And I'm just going to say this. One of these days, I'll reveal the entire thing. I promise. One of these days, I'll tell everybody exactly how it went down. I'll just say it this way, though. I was living in Florida, and I had a connection up here, and someone looked out for me, and I had to make a decision because it wasn't totally set, but it looked like it was trending that way. And I had to make a decision at that moment, which is, do I throw it out there or not? And if I do and I'm wrong, I'm done. I'm the guy in mom's basement who would be like, oh, there's some guy in Florida. And if I was wrong, it would have killed me. If I didn't and it happened, I'd never forgive myself. So I took a shot. And I think that's a good lesson for everybody, right?
Yeah, it's a really interesting dilemma that you had to go through. Did you almost feel like, in a way, though, you had nothing to lose? At that point, did you know that this was something that you wanted to get back into?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I knew I wanted to get back into it. And I was even thinking about coming, and I had actually gone on WGR a few times, from there, applying for a job, and we had talked about it, and it was something that could happen in the future. And yes, I was in that mode of, I wasn't specifically trying to do something for Buffalo, oh my God, I got to break a story. But it was I knew, man, I want to go back into this, and I have this information. And if I'm right about this, oh my God. And certainly I was, and obviously it did wonders for me after that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. What a combination I thought it was going to be, having Terrell Owens and Lee Evans on the same team. I was like, oh man, what a combination. Best wide receiver duo in the NFL.
The drought, I did the math today. The drought was 9 years old, and it would go on for another 8 years, even after they signed him. Ugh. How wild is that, to put us back into a very type of space? Okay, speaking of space, this is a very weird question I thought of today, because I was driving with my wife and son today, and we go shopping. We're in a parking lot. So imagine you're in a parking lot, okay? And you're driving, and there's cars to your right, there's cars to your left. All the cars on your right, as you're driving down the aisle of the parking lot, all the cars on the right are filled up. There's no spots. On the left, though, it looks like this. All right. Do you decide that there's a specific spot you pull into if it looks like this? So there's a car. There's 2 spots. Do you pull in? You're the driver.
Yeah.
Where the car is okay, where the car is on your left, or do you pull in where the one with the car is on your right, or do you not care?
I pull in where the car is on my right. So I go to the second spot. So
Okay,
I pass
why?
the first spot, I go to the second spot, because it's not as aggressive of a turn, and because then I'm getting out of the car, so my door isn't next to another car when I open it.
Okay, what if you have your wife and child in the car with you, whoever she sits, I don't know, but what if your wife is in the car with you? You're still choosing that, even though your spot is more open and hers isn't?
Yeah, because I'm selfish and everybody else
Wow.
can figure it out. I don't think I would think about it enough, but I think I would go to the second spot just because I do think that, it's something that bothers me when people drive and they turn right to make a left or they turn left to make a right, like they bump
Yeah.
out a little
Yeah.
bit to
Yeah.
do that annoys me. I don't like that. Just make sure you cut it at the right angle.
I'm
And if
going to
you're
the other one.
really,
I'm going to the other one. I'm going to the first spot right there. Okay. Take a look at this. I'm going right here. Sorry, over here. Here, this spot.
yeah,
And actually, because you call it aggressive, I call it certainty. Like if I go a little bit more wide, I'm not sure if I'm getting that angle correctly. If
uh-huh.
I go and do a hard cut, I know I'm just going right in and I'm in the exact spot where I need to be and I'm ready to rock and roll.
I'm going to ask you a question too. Now, do you park your car in a garage or in the driveway? Oh, you live in the
We
city.
don't have a driveway and we have a
Yeah.
one-way street and I have to park on the street and literally move my car. I can only park on the left on Mondays and Tuesdays and the right on Wednesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays. This is true, people. We
Yeah.
still love where we live, and I wouldn't
Yeah.
have it any other way, but it's because of the plows and things like that.
Okay, so you're the wrong person to ask this question, but I have become a back into the driveway person. So I
Oh.
live in a neighborhood and I go past my driveway a little bit and then I back in, and my wife does not do that. And she's always
Okay.
like, "Why do you need to do that?" She's like, "That you're not impressing any."
I'm
And
with
I'm
you
like,
on this one.
"I'm not trying to impress anybody. I want ease of
Yes.
ability to leave as quick as possible."
Yes.
And I like being able to just see straight ahead as opposed to now. This has changed. I have a newer car now that has a rear view camera. My last car did not. That made it a little bit more complicated. But now that I have a rear view camera, back it in, go basically right up to the garage, call it it's perfect.
Rear view cameras are one of the greatest inventions of cars ever, by the way.
Yeah, they
They're
are.
amazing.
And then this actually came up the other day.
I am with you though.
Yeah.
I'm a back end guy, and I also do that in parking lots when I'm not going to prevent someone from doing what they need to do.
Yeah.
I'll back in when I can.
I like backing in as well. This is my last. This is a ridiculously stupid question. I have no idea how we got to this point. I have a theory. Now, you live in the city, so it might be a little bit different.
Uh-huh.
I have a theory that 90% of people don't use their front door at all. Am I wrong?
Oh, I think you're wrong. 90%. There's a lot of people who don't, but I will tell you that pretty much everybody on my street does.
Really?
Yeah. Now I do live in the city. Our
Uh-huh.
houses are very close together.
Yeah.
And there's not much room, on the sides there. The side doors aren't used as much.
Uh-huh.
When you live in more of a suburban setting and you have when you
I'm
walk out your side door and there's more room, you go in the backyard and that might be a little different. I get it.
Speaking more familiarity, living in a suburb, living in a town, that
Yeah.
type of deal. I go in my house through the garage. Like I open the garage and then there's a door into the kitchen through the garage. My wife does the same thing. We both do the same thing at our parents' houses, and everybody in nobody uses the front door. But we had guests coming over. So my wife was like, "Oh, we got to, shut the garage and have them come in through the front door because the garage is messy." And I was like, "Yeah, totally fine." But isn't it weird that we never do that? Like, why they don't
No,
care?
I get it. I would understand that. I would say when I lived in Florida and people had a garage, that would be often the case.
Uh-huh.
And my parents do live in Williamsville, and they do the same thing you just said. They do use their front door quite often, but usually they park in the garage and go right through the garage door.
Yeah, I mean,
I would say 90% is way too much, though.
90% is way too much, but I would say 90% of people in a similar situation to myself.
Maybe.
Once again, selfish. I'm only thinking about myself. I'm not thinking about others.
All right, so we're going to be back next week at some point. In the meantime, Matt's going to be all over everything at WKBW TV Channel 7. I'm going to be all over everything on WGR Sports Radio 550. In fact, if you're listening to this tonight, I'll be on with Jeremy and Joe at 7 a.m. bright and early tomorrow morning. Matt's got everything covered in the TV side, and you'll be talking about it as well.
There's no way. So is Josh going to come back to Buffalo to sign this?
Oh, this is a good question. Do we know if he's getting married this week? He had his bachelor party 2 weeks ago.
No,
I really don't know. I'm asking. I have no idea.
Deion Dawkins spilled the tea.
Oh,
Deion Dawkins unintentionally breaks so much news, and I think it has to make so many people upset. Okay. He said on a TV show that Josh is getting married May 31st.
Okay, this is great information. I had no idea.
Yeah.
And the reason why I asked is Yana says to me, "Hey, I see that Dawson Knox and his wife Alex on Instagram, Alex posted.
Wait, May 31st is the day. I was like,
that Alex posted on Instagram, Dawson Knox's wife, that they're headed out of town. She posted a picture with 2 passports and said, "So it begins." She said, "I wonder if they're going somewhere for Josh's wedding." And I said, "I have no idea. He did just have his bachelor party. I don't know." So we were just debating because we didn't know when he was getting married.
No, May 31st is what
According to Dion.
That's what Dion said. So right. I have a hard
time.
That's
good because Micah's charity softball game is May 3rd.
Okay. So yeah, he should be able to conceivably do both.
Yeah.
Well, I would imagine he comes back.
You mean to talk to the media?
I don't think he's coming back just to talk to the media, but I think when you're signing the most guaranteed money contract of all time, I don't know if it's
I see what you're saying.
I don't know if it's as simple as going to UPS and signing the contract.
I agree. And they got to do it before Wednesday, I would think, because they have to have that money available. So yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
He probably does. And we'll hear from him just like we did from Greg Rousseau and Reid Ferguson, Khalil Shakir, and we'll keep everybody on top of that as well. All right. Thanks for hanging with us tonight. Thanks to Mike Rabier, our producer as well. And we're going to be, back with much more what's going on with the Buffalo Bills throughout the legal tampering period, as they call it, and then free agency, which begins Wednesday at 4 p.m. Who knows, Matt? By the time this episode goes up, there could have been 10 more moves made with the Buffalo Bills and everybody else in the NFL. Thanks a lot, everybody.